Joe, I want to thank you for taking time to join me today on Lessons from Learning Leaders. And I believe we're actually live on Riverside, which is something new that Riverside.fm is doing. Great platform if you're doing any kind of podcasting. I don't get any money for that. I just really like the platform. But Joe, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Duane, it's a pleasure and honor. I'm excited.
Now, let me tell you something. I went to your presentation at Training Mag, and I was looking at it. I was actually just looking at the brochure again, because your session was titled "How Executives and Learning Leaders Transform the Training Culture." And when I saw that in the brochure, I thought I want to go see that. I think I'm a bit of a learning leader, and I'd like to transform our culture into a learning culture where people are like, there's a new training. I should want to go do that. What I see on your brochure, on your handouts, there's a line missing from the title that was in the brochure, and it's a very important line, which I thought it was profound. In the brochure, it says how executives and learning leaders transform the training culture to make training a want to, not a have to. Now, before we get into what you taught, I want you to tell me your story. Tell me a little bit about yourself, because when you present, it isn't a feeling. I'm going to tell you, it isn't a feeling at the end of it where Joe really knows what he's talking about. He's a professional. At the end of it, it's like, wow, I want to be this guy's friend. I want to go have beer with this guy. So tell me about yourself, because in your LinkedIn, it is not your typical about either. I love that. And at the end, it says, I'm also an assassin. And so I got to know about that part of it too. So if you don't mind, tell me about yourself.
Absolutely, Duane. Most people don't like talking about themselves, nor do I. I was actually going to start with a question, but I'll answer your question first. So I use the line assassin because, as I share and as I promise, kind of in every session, every experience, every keynote, kickoff, client work, doesn't matter. My goal number one is to have fun. If I'm not having fun, I don't want to do it. But my goal for all of us is to have fun, and then we're going to learn what we need to learn, and then we're going to take action on what we need to take action on. But if we're not having fun, we're not going to learn anything anyway. And so I try to apply that everywhere in my life, whether it is in martial arts that I'm doing right now, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, trying to be the best dad in the galaxy, not even in the world. It's a big deal, galaxy. My wife gave my daughter some money, and she came home with a mug from school in kindergarten that said, best dad in the galaxy. I was like, that's a goal. So it's got to be fun. So I said, how can I explain who I am and what I do work-wise? Because most of the time we were like, oh, so you're a motivational speaker? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Sure. All right. But that's the least of the work, right? So the line assassin comes in as kind of, I think the language I use is I hunt, I stalk, and then I eliminate in some way, shape, or form organizational problems, right? Because I'm an organizational consultant, strategy consultant, taking a look at some of the big picture items that really need to get taken care of so that we can, for example, make training a want to, not a have to.
So I'm sure there's a lot of people who are watching or listening, and they have their training role. Like they may have just started in training. Training may have been a passion of theirs. Like there's some folks who get into the training because they're really good at their job and their boss says, you should teach other people how to do it. Then there are folks who are like, I really love training. I mean, when I got into this, I started realizing I love to learn stuff, all the books in the back. But then when I learn something, I'm like, everybody has to know this. And so I want to go tell people. How does a person who is in that training role and wants to do more make that jump into, I guess, how did you do it? Tell us how you got from where you started to where you are today.
You know what? I don't think I'm any further along than I was when I started, because I got pushed into it. My resident assistant, back when I was in college over 20 years ago, she said, Joe, you should join the leadership development program. And I listened to her because I thought she was pretty. But it was the best decision I made in my entire life. I became president of that organization in college. And while I was president for that 1 year, I still facilitated more workshops than everybody combined, which said something that I didn't realize and people needed to tell me later on, like, you should kind of do this for the rest of your life. But I read all the books in the leadership library that we had, much smaller than the library that you've got behind you. We were college students, but I decided to read, right? I read on leadership. I read study skills. I read, the good books by Zig Ziglar and John C. Maxwell and all those. But that's where it starts. It starts by having a love of learning, which my kids will never understand why I still want to learn and do things, but it's keep learning. Those are the only books I read. I watch superhero movies, but I read books to learn. And then I figure out who needs to know what I just figured out. And I connect with those people. Or
See,
I
now
write about it.
we're in a dangerous area here because the only thing I have more than books are comic books. And so we're in danger of this whole discussion just derailing.
That's
right
a different podcast, right?
It is. It is one I should probably start. But then I'd have to start buying comic books. And then there's the discussion with the wife, and the kids are like, why can't we eat, Dad? And I'm like,
Yep.
Did you see the new issue of, Silver Surfer? So what I found about your presentation, everyone thinks I hate slides. And I don't hate PowerPoint slides. I hate PowerPoint slides as a crutch.
Yeah.
And I want PowerPoint to be your visual aid. And when I saw you do with PowerPoint in there, I'm sitting there saying, okay, I guess I'm opening PowerPoint because this is amazing. So kudos, just front to start to end, just a great presentation. But tell us about what you talked about there. How can execs and learning leaders transform their culture?
So I'll answer that question by talking about PowerPoint first.
Okay.
People do use PowerPoint as a crutch. They use it because, especially when we were first getting into it, and now Canva's a big deal, and there's going to be another thing that comes along, whether it's AI or not. But they were like, oh, look at all these animations, and I can make the words do this, and they go, whoosh, whoosh, and there's all these. No. What makes it work is less, right? Less is more, because it's about creating an experience. The PowerPoint is supposed to, as you said, Duane, is enhance it by being a visual aid for the visual learners. So if you don't learn visually, then what do you need? Maybe you need a conversation. Maybe you need a breakout session. Maybe you need to sit and think with your thoughts for a little moment, right? That's part of the experience. Or maybe you can't sit for too long and you got to get up, because people only learn as long as their butt is comfortable. So we got to get them up and moving. And it's not everyone. It's some people. And so when we talk about transforming the training culture, we do have to first look at the organizational culture. Is what we are trying to do in onboarding and training and in our meetings and in any way that we engage our people, is that going to work in our culture? Because if it's not, because our culture sucks, our culture is boring, our culture is uninteresting, when we put out, applications for jobs, those are boring too, right? Then we're just going to attract boring people because they read something boring and they go, oh, that's me. Instead of, I like to say, everything we do has spunk. And I like to look for people who have spunk and they're fun. And you came up to me after my session. We had a nice conversation. I was like, yeah, that's what I like. So we have to look at the big picture. We have to look at the organizational culture before we look at the training culture, and then develop everything that we do. Again, whether it's onboarding, training, meetings, teamwork, engagement, you name it, the application process, build it as an experience, so that we can engage as many people as possible in a way that they want to be engaged.
I'm listening and inspired again, and I'm thinking to myself, how often do people want to change this culture? They know what they want the culture to be. They see what the culture is, but what the culture is a barrier to becoming what it could be.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but
100%.
I'm thinking, I know what I want to design, and the way we do this will change the culture.
Yeah.
But because the culture is what you said, boring, they look at this and say, basically, T'Challa, we don't do that here.
Right. I get that reference, or I understood that reference.
Yeah. Another Captain America quote. See, derailed completely. So what do you do? What do you do then? How do you change a culture that just seems so resistant to culture change?
So that's fun. I recently started working with a client where we knew we needed to do that. They had seen a session about culture and they said, this is what we want to do. I said, I'd like to just keep it simple, call it transform your culture. Let's transform the training culture. Let's transform the learning culture, whatever you want, fill in the blank. But the word culture is in the work that we're doing. And so we get all their trainers, all their ops people, everybody comes in. We've got one day to kind of kick this off, and then we're going to start this 1-year journey. And people were pissed at me. They were pissed. The only people who were not upset were the 2 clients. And we took a moment to step out of the experience while everyone was kind of working on a project. And they said, so this is going really well. This is exactly what we want, but nothing that our people expected. I said, yeah, it's just like the first time you work out in a gym. It hurts more than you'd expect for a couple days. You're like, I can't go back to the gym. I need to recover. And so that's what it is. I like to say either slap us in the face or stab us in the back. The slap in the face is, hey, we got to work on some things. The direction that we're going, who we are, who we're becoming, we're not moving in the right way. So let me slap you in the face and say, this is the direction we're going. Or stab you in the back and say, you got to go. This isn't working for you anymore. And so we're always having this conversation of how do we have the really tough conversations with really good people that we want to bring along for the ride. So it's a little bit of a slap in the face, and then we nurture, right? And we have the empathy and the understanding. Yeah, this is going to be tough. That's why it's a 1-year agreement. We're going to take the time to do this right. But the first time you hear it is like, what are we talking about?
I'm curious how many times people hear 1-year agreement and they're like, wait, no, what? Why a year? And because some people see this culture change as being something that they just put out a new vision and boom, we've got the culture change. How often do you get any kind of resistance to that? And tell me about what you do over that year that helps the transformation along.
So 1 year's not enough time. Let's start there, because we know that people don't like change. What they do like is when they come up with an idea, they call it innovation, right? But when someone else comes up with an idea, they call it change. We don't like change. We don't like when someone else comes up with the ideas.
I like that. I like that a lot.
But it's true, and it's what happens. So it is going to take time, and over the course of that time, and I let them know, look, I'll talk to the clients, not the people in the room. One of you is going to quit. One of you is going to get fired. No. You gotta talk. That's the side conversation. You got to be okay losing some people throughout the process, because some people are not going to grow with this. Some people don't want to go in that direction. Culture is about who we are. Culture is about understanding our people, right? Strategy and the vision and the direction, that's where we're going. So we have to line up the culture and the strategy and move those both forward. And some people don't like where we're going, and some people don't like who we are or who we're becoming along the way. But it takes time. And that's why I like spaced learning, having a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks in between things, especially overnights, especially bathroom breaks. I'll tell you, that's where I solve all of my problems. Like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. I'll be back in a minute. I come back with the answer, right? People get their ideas in long walks or in the shower or in meditation. We need that space. And the more space you give, the better ideas, the better insights people have.
I was just on another call earlier today, and I said, I was in the shower today and I had this idea, and it's absolutely right. There are times I wish I had something in there to write with, you get those ideas there, you get that space there.
Yeah.
How important is it that you let those people go? Those people who aren't going to change?
Critical. It's call it mission critical, if you will, right? Because you get what you tolerate. And if you tolerate people who do not want change or do not want to grow or do not want personal development and growth or do not want to make training a want to, not a have to, or do not want to transform the culture or do not want to adapt to AI, just like people didn't want to adapt to smartphones, right? If you still have a flip phone now, what are we doing here, right? The world is going to change whether we want it to or not. So there's always going to be the early adopters and the late adopters, right? But there's going to be people who refuse. And those people are going to hold us back. And then everyone else in the organization, I'm not the first person to say this, but everyone else in the organization is going to say, well, if they can act that way, I guess so can I. If they can slack off, so can I. If they can talk like that, then why do I need to change? So they have to go.
And it's not even so much that I mean, you're right. I'm not arguing with what you said. You're right there. I've argued with some folks or just made the position, look, you're not only not helping the organization, you're not helping them.
Yeah.
If they're going to be unhappy here and they can be happy in another position and create value there, by keeping them here, you're keeping them from being as happy as they could be. You're keeping them from their own self-actualization, really.
100%.
Man, a lot to think about there. Over that year long, what are some of the things that you're engaging in? Because transformation, like you said, a year isn't long enough, and transformation isn't going to happen overnight. What are some things that you're doing as you come in each time?
Sure. So there's always 2, maybe 3 levels of a conversation that we should always be having, right? E-Myth talks about this. Great, non-Marvel, non-DC, non-comic book, the E-Myth, the entrepreneurial myth. But it talks about working on the business and working in the business. Or as we would say, working on the organization, the vision, the strategy, the goals, the plan, the culture, and then working in it and having all the things that come up and actually doing our job and hitting our deliverables. So we always have to balance the 2 of those, right? There's the projects and the things that are coming up so we can develop our skills and turn our skills into organizational capability where we all do really great work together. But then there's also working on the culture and the ethos of the organization, kind of the spirit and who we are and how we think and how we talk, the code of communication, how we operate together. We use the language of real GPA. So pop quiz, Duane, what's GPA stand for? Do you still remember?
I don't.
Grade point average.
That's why it was so low. I don't remember that.
And the number is as boring as the topic. It's great for 5 to 10% of employers, but we've kind of rebranded GPA to be real GPA. What's your real GPA? Like, what do employers want? What does your significant other want? What do teammates want? They want to know what's your genius. What talents do you bring that our organization or our team or department need? What's your passion? What do you really love to do? Because if you don't love it, you're probably not going to do it too long. And then what's the achievement? What are you aiming for? Where are you going? How can we help you get there? And how can you help us get where we're going? That's working on the business, on the culture, on the collaboration, right? So there's these 2 levels of conversations that we're always having. But then there's also this, as I said, there's 2, sometimes 3. This third one is just what people need to talk about, what people need to get off their chest, what people need to vent about. And sometimes you need to create that space where that's what happens, and that's okay. And it could derail, I'll say, an amateur because they're not expecting it, or they say, oh, that's not what we're talking about today. But maybe that's why you lose that person. And you needed that person, and that person wanted to be a part of this, wanted to grow, but had a couple questions or concerns.
You have to have that willingness as a trainer. Sardi Glove talks about this. He said, and it stuck with me, a good facilitator gives up control for contribution. Yeah. And when there's that opportunity, when you see somebody who you've created such a safe environment that they're actually opening up, and you turn to them and say, we're not talking about that right now. You may have just shut them down for good. And it sounds like you're saying you need to be open to saying, this is what we were going to do, but this is what we're doing now. It goes back to something else that I think Bob Pike used to talk about was you have facilitators who are presenter centered. They're centered on themselves, and they really want everybody in the room to see how smart they are. Then you have folks who are content centered, and that's where what you're talking about. We don't have time to talk about that today. Actually, I have all these great slides you need to see. But then there's being participant centered and recognizing this person is opening up. This is more important than my content. Right. Am I reading you? Am I hearing you wrong? Is that what you're saying?
No, you're 100% right. I mean, you're sparking, our 3rd and our 4th and our 5th podcast, but it's, I like to break words down. I'm a geek about words and understanding where'd that word come from. What does that word mean? We just think about the word facilitate. First, going back to my hot RA, if I may, where she said you should join the leadership development program. We weren't leadership development trainers. We weren't leadership development speakers. We weren't leadership development lecturers. We were leadership development facilitators. And if you break down the word facilitate, facile, right? to make easy. It is our job, whether you call yourself a trainer, whether you call yourself an executive, I don't care. It's our job to make it easier for our people. Gary Vee talks constantly about, I am not the boss of my people, they're the boss of me. My job is to understand them and where they're going, and even at a level of understanding them every single day, because how they felt yesterday may be different than how they feel today, which impacts their performance. There's no separation between work and home. That's gone if it ever existed in the beginning, right? If you have a terrible fight with a significant other, you're bringing that to work that day. If your dog passes in the morning, that's coming to work with you if you even make it to work. And so understanding our people is critical. And that's why I love it's facilitating. We are here to make learning easy, to make culture development easy, to make transition easy, to make engagement easy. So how do you make training a want to, not a have to? Going back to that kind of subtitle, is our job's to make it easy. It's to understand the context, not the content, and let them drive it. We have to let go of, I'm not in charge. I am not. That's why my that's why all the people in that room were upset, because we had to take that sidetrack to realize where we were all going so that we can then have this strategic alignment to move forward.
I was having a conversation with some of our HR folks about how they were going to come in as SMEs and talk about the benefits programs that we have to help with our people's mental health.
Yeah.
We ask a lot of our folks to go out, and some of the exercises end up in just being verbally abused. It's just the nature of our game sometimes. And I said, we need to make sure that they know these resources are out there. And the concern was, I remember they looked at me and said, well, what do we do in there if, there's an opportunity here where they could talk about some really personal, important stuff. And I looked at them and I said, if we've created the sense of safety in that room where they can open up like that, we need to consider that a big success.
Yeah.
So what I'm curious to you is, when you start talking about culture and you start talking about change and you see these emotions coming up, what are some of the things that you've done, that you do right out of the gate to help improve and create a sense of safety in the classroom?
I love that. And we always try to, starting with your first question, so you said you're an assassin, right? So I always try to look at things a little differently, and then again, have fun doing it. So I have a mentor of mine who said, it's more than creating just a safe space, but creating a brave space where people can be who they really are, right? Instead of, all right, I feel safe to come talk to you and cry on your shoulders. Nothing wrong with that. But then what's the next level of that? It's a brave space where I can have the honest or tough conversation with you and in front of everybody else. Kind of this same client situation that I've been kind of using as a current running example or case study. There was a woman in the room who was new to the organization, into operations. And she said, one of my goals, as everyone's kind of sharing in the room, what's your ambition? What do you really want? We're applying kind of the real GPA construct. And she said, I'd like to become a better public speaker. I said, great, let's do it now. So this is a direct answer to your question. You said, what do you do? So first, I get off the stage. I sit down. There's always a chair or a stool. Like, I'm done. Now it's your turn. So I said, insert name here. I said, you want to do that now? She said, sure. Right? Like, what do you mean? Or what are we going to do? I'm like, you've met me. Come on, we've been doing this for an hour. We're going to do this. And I said, listen, here's what we want to do. I don't want to just create a safe space. I want to create a brave space. You ready to be brave? You got to invite them. You got to enroll them. So this woman stands up. I sit down. I said, tell us all over again, but now as if you're presenting to everybody. Let's do it. She had to stage for 5 to 10 minutes. People cheered for her. They applauded. They were excited. They asked questions. She was answering. And the whole time she was nervous. But that got her started immediately. So Duane, when you say, so what do you do? I'm like, I use the moment. Use the moment. And I drop the stage. I'm not in charge anymore. I don't need to be there. At this point, she knows more about herself and what she wants and needs than I do. And then the entire room can coach her. So we're also building a coaching culture where we can support each other to step up, to level up. I'll say one more thing. I'm starting to feel like I'm going on and on and on. There's so many things that we can talk about here. I love it. There's this idea where, as we're creating these cultures, as we're trying to do all this work, that we have to have the answer as the trainer or the expert or whatever in the room. But most of the time, the answer comes from everybody else. So if we could just shut up and let that moment happen, there's amazing things that we'll see in that room. And that's what's happening when we create the culture. And so I'll just tell them, hey, does everyone notice what just happened? We got that. That's happened. That happened. That happened. And now we're working on it while we're working in it.
I love everything there. And it made me think of a couple things. One, think of how much courage you just gave the other people in the room. Because this one person had the courage to get up there, but there may have been someone else in the room who at that moment going, there's no way I could do this. They see them go up and do it. And now they're recognizing I can be brave here. This is no one's going to hurt me. In fact, everybody in here wants to see me succeed. Right. So that one action, what you're saying there, impacts everybody in the room. Yes, everybody's contributing, but everybody in there is also impacted in a positive way too. Another thing you said was, everybody will contribute. I often tell our trainers, I would bet 70% of what we're going to talk about is already known in this room. Because this person may know 3% of what we're going to say. This person may know 7%. This person may know 15%. And your job as a facilitator is to get all of that out of everyone in here and then fill in the gaps, fill in the blanks. But most of it's in there. And when you can do that, they're going to feel more. They're going to do what Bob said. They're going to feel impressed with themselves. Bob always said, your job isn't to look good, it's to make them feel important and be impressed with themselves, not impressed with you. Right. And I think that's a great way of doing that. We're coming up on the end of the podcast, and like you said, there's so much we could talk about. That there's one thing that you said that I wrote down, and I want you to share with that. You offered 3 questions, and it was, what does that say about our culture? What does that say about our leadership? And I want you to give the 3rd question, but talk a little bit about that.
So let's bring it full circle all the way back. The title of the session was How Executives and Learning Leaders, right? People such as yourself and our viewers here. How do executives do this? It starts by looking at the entire culture. And so I started these questions a couple years ago. I said, listen, anything goes right, anything goes wrong, I want you to ask yourself 2 questions. And at that time it was only 2. And then I added the 3rd one because I realized we're missing something. The first thing, if people aren't applying, or if they're ghosting us in the application process, or if our people are really exhausted or tired, just what does it say about our culture? Does it say that our culture is one that doesn't support mental health, or our people need, right? Like you were saying before. So let's take a look at the whole picture. Then what does it say about my leadership? Let's make it personal. What can I do? What can I do? But then I think most importantly, because people tend to stop there like, what can I do? And great ideas, right? But people don't like your ideas because it's change. So then question number 3 is, how can I take 100% responsibility? How can I, as the leader, as the executive, as the person who's running the organization, how do I take 100, not 90%, not 80, not 20%, but how can, wherever this, if I'm running an event, right, such as this one experience, whatever happens in that room, I'm responsible. Whether it goes one way, 2 ways, sideways, southways, all the ways, I'm responsible. So how can I be responsible for the application process that is boring, for the interview process that is making people ghost us because it's not interesting anymore, for the engagement for our meetings that could have been an email, or what I've just recently started saying, onboarding and training that could have been a YouTube video, right? For all these things that we do. How can I take responsibility and own it? Because then we can make magic happen.
We are at the end, and I want to thank you for being here. And you're right, this isn't going to be the last podcast. There's so much more we could talk about, but I'm sure that there are folks out there who want to talk to you more and engage with you. I know you're on LinkedIn, but where else can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, first name, last name, Joe Urbanski. My email address, I'll just throw it out there, is my first initial J, last name Urbanski, Urbanski, at tsgresults.com. That's obviously the website as well, tsgresults.com. YouTube, you can search me up too there, but LinkedIn's a really good start. That's where you find out what I'm an assassin for.
Well, I appreciate you being here, and I try to close the podcast the same way that Bob used to end his, and that's and I know you're doing it every day. So everyone, I encourage you to go out and add value and make a difference. We'll see you next time.